And they really go deep, you know?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about what to do, but the why behind it.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's not about shutting people out.
No, it's more about creating that safe space where everyone feels respected.
Okay, so less like building walls and more like a healthy force field to protect everyone's emotional well-being.
Exactly.
I like that analogy.
And the guidelines highlight some great potential benefits too, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like better communication, less conflict,
Oh, wow.
even a boost in everyone's overall happiness.
Sign me up for that.
Yeah, who wouldn't want that?
So before we get into the how-to of setting those boundaries, can we start with the basics? Like, what exactly are healthy boundaries when we're talking about family?
Well, you can think of it this way. Everyone has that invisible bubble of personal space, both physical and emotional.
Yeah.
So healthy boundaries are about defining, you know, what's okay and what's not okay.
Within that bubble.
Right within that bubble.
Yeah.
It's about communicating your needs and expectations
Okay.
in a way that encourages respect and understanding.
So it's not about like barking orders or laying down the law.
Oh, no.
It's more like
It's more about
having a conversation.
open and honest conversations
Yeah.
about what everyone needs to feel comfortable and respected.
You got it. So it's about replacing those unspoken rules and assumptions
Exactly.
with clear communication.
Yes.
Okay. I can get behind that.
So, for example, if lending money to family always stresses you out,
Oh, yeah. Been there.
you could set a boundary around that.
Okay.
You know, explain your reasons calmly, respectfully, and without placing blame.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of your own feelings and needs rather than expecting others to just magically know what they are.
Right.
And I've definitely struggled with that in the past.
Oh,
Okay, so let's say you've figured out those boundaries, those lines in the sand.
Uh-huh.
How do you actually communicate those to your family in a way that's effective, but, you know, it doesn't start World War III?
Well, the guidelines have 10 specific steps for establishing healthy boundaries.
10 steps? Wow.
Yeah, and one that really stands out is using I statements.
Okay.
It's such a simple shift in language,
Okay.
but it makes a world of difference.
Okay. I've heard about I statements before, but sometimes they feel kind of awkward,
Oh, yeah.
like I'm in therapy or something.
I know what you mean.
Could you give us a real-life example of how this would actually work in a family situation?
Sure. So imagine your aunt's always giving you unsolicited advice about your career,
Oh, yeah.
even though you've told her you're happy with your current path.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, you're always telling me what to do, which can sound accusatory,
Yeah.
you could try, I feel a bit overwhelmed when I receive advice that I haven't asked for. I appreciate your concern, but I'd prefer to navigate this on my own.
Whoa, that's amazing. It's direct, but it's not like you're attacking her.
Right.
It's like you're gently redirecting the conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And another key point is the importance of setting those boundaries early on.
So this is where it gets really interesting for me because I didn't grow up in a family that was big on setting boundaries.
Uh-huh.
So now as an adult, it feels almost impossible to change those dynamics.
Right.
So is it ever too late to start setting those boundaries?
It's never too late.
Okay.
But it's true that the longer a dynamic has been in place, the harder it can be to shift those patterns.
Yeah, it's like those unspoken rules become like deeply ingrained grooves in a record.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But the good news is you can always choose to play a different tune.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So it might take more effort to change those established patterns, but it's not impossible.
Right.
Okay, what are some tips for tackling those tougher situations where, let's say, a family member just flat out refuses to respect your boundaries?
Yeah, the guidelines talk about dealing with violations, which can be tricky.
Uh-huh.
They recommend approaching these situations with firmness and grace.
Okay.
Calmly reiterating your boundaries, explaining how their actions make you feel, and being consistent.
So if someone keeps pushing those boundaries, you keep pushing back, but in a way that's respectful, not aggressive.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between being assertive and compassionate.
You got it.
But let's be honest, dealing with family can be emotionally charged.
Yeah.
What about those moments when you're about to lose it, when you just want to scream, you just don't get it?
Oh, yeah.
Any advice for those heated moments?
Well, the guidelines actually recommend taking a time out when things get too intense.
Okay.
Step away, take some deep breaths, and give yourself a chance to cool down before trying to communicate again.
That's a good reminder. It's so easy to get swept up in the heat of the moment and say things you'll regret later.
Exactly.
So stepping back and giving yourself some space to process is key. What about those family members who weaponize guilt?
Oh, yeah.
The ones who make you feel like a terrible person for even thinking about setting boundaries.
The guilt trips.
Yeah, it's like they have black belts in emotional manipulation.
They're an Olympic sport in some families.
Right. So how do you handle that?
Well, the guidelines offer a powerful strategy, detaching from the need to please everyone.
Okay.
You can acknowledge their feelings
Yeah.
without taking responsibility for them.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that you have the right to set boundaries, even if it makes someone else unhappy.
That's a tough one for me. I'm a total people pleaser.
Yeah, but you're starting to see that saying yes to everything, even when it goes against your needs, doesn't actually serve anyone in the long run.
It's like running a marathon while carrying everyone else's baggage.
Exactly. You'll burn out before you reach the finish line.
Okay. I'm definitely feeling inspired to start setting some healthier boundaries in my own family.
That's great.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, could we touch on one more thing?
Sure.
The guidelines also talk about respecting other people's boundaries.
Yes.
Why is that just as important as setting our own?
Well, it creates that two-way street of respect and understanding.
Okay.
If you demand that your boundaries be honored, but you don't offer the same courtesy to others, it creates an imbalance.
So it's about recognizing that everyone has their own invisible bubble.
Yes.
And we need to be mindful of those boundaries.
Exactly.
Even if they don't perfectly align with our own.
It's like navigating a crowded dance floor.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you need to be aware of the space around you and move in a way that respects everyone's right to enjoy the music.
Without being stepped on.
Right.
I love that. Okay, let's pause here for a moment. When we come back, we'll delve into some even trickier territory. Those subtle but powerful dynamics that can make setting boundaries feel like an uphill battle.
Welcome back. You know, you might be thinking, okay, setting boundaries sounds great in theory, but what about those messy, real-life situations?
Yeah.
You know, where things aren't so clear-cut.
Like, how do you actually navigate those unspoken family rules and expectations that make even the thought of setting boundaries feel totally overwhelming?
Yeah, family dynamics can get complicated. But these guidelines offer some really practical strategies for tackling those tougher scenarios.
Let's get into those. I'm ready to learn some ninja-level boundary setting techniques.
Okay, one strategy that stood out to me was this idea of challenging those unspoken family rules.
Okay, that sounds kind of scary. How do you even begin to challenge those deeply ingrained beliefs that everyone in the family just seems to accept as truth?
It starts with awareness.
Yeah.
Take some time to reflect on those unspoken expectations in your family.
Yeah.
What messages did you receive growing up about expressing your needs, handling conflict, or pursuing your own path?
You know, in my family, there was this unspoken rule that you never rock the boat, you know? Never challenge the status quo, even if it means sacrificing your own happiness.
Right, and once you become aware of those unspoken rules, you can start to question them.
Okay.
Ask yourself, are these rules actually serving me and my family, or are they holding us back from building healthier relationships?
So it's about having the courage to say, wait a minute, maybe those old rules don't apply anymore.
Exactly, and that can be a powerful shift. Now, the guidelines also talk about something called enmeshment.
Enmeshment, that sounds intense.
It can be.
What does that even mean?
So think of it like this enmeshment is when the boundaries between family members become so blurred that it's hard to tell where one person ends and the other begins.
Okay.
It can feel like everyone is constantly entangled with little room for individuality or personal space.
So it's like those families where everyone knows everyone else's business, and there's this constant pressure to conform to the group.
That's a great analogy.
Like if one person gets a cold, everyone else starts sneezing.
Exactly. And while it might seem like closeness, enmeshment can actually be suffocating.
Okay.
It can prevent individuals from developing a strong sense of self and lead to unhealthy dependencies.
Wow. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in that kind of dynamic, how do you start to create those much needed boundaries?
Well, the guidelines suggest starting small.
Okay.
Gradually asserting your independence, making choices that prioritize your own needs and goals.
Okay.
For example, maybe you start spending a bit more time on your own hobbies.
Yep.
Or pursuing a new interest that's totally separate from your family's expectations.
So it's like dipping your toes in the water.
Yes.
Before diving headfirst into the deep end.
Exactly. And as you start to assert your individuality, you know, it might be helpful to communicate your reasoning to your family.
Okay.
Let them know that you're not trying to push them away,
Right.
but that you need some space to grow and explore who you are outside of the family unit.
So it's about reassuring them that you still love and care for them, But you also need to honor your own needs.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between connection and autonomy.
Speaking of connection, one thing I've always struggled with is setting boundaries without feeling like I'm damaging those close relationships. Is there a way to set those boundaries without hurting people's feelings or creating distance?
That's such a common concern.
Yeah.
And the guidelines emphasize the importance of communicating your boundaries with compassion and understanding.
Okay.
It's about framing the conversation in a way that focuses on your needs rather than placing blame.
So instead of saying, you always interrupt me and it drives me crazy, you could try something like, I feel unheard when I'm interrupted. Could you please wait until I finish speaking?
Exactly.
That's much gentler.
It's assertive, but not aggressive.
Yeah. What about those situations where a family member just refuses to acknowledge your boundaries, no matter how clearly you communicate them? What do you do then?
That's when you might need to set some consequences.
Consequences.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything dramatic.
Go.
It could be as simple as saying, if you continue to interrupt me, I'm going to excuse myself from the conversation.
So it's about following through with those consequences.
Yes.
Even if it feels uncomfortable.
It's about showing them that you're serious about your boundaries.
Okay.
And that their actions have an impact on you. Now, the guidelines also talk about something that can be a real game changer.
Okay, what's that?
Seeking outside support.
Okay, let's talk about that. I know a lot of people might feel hesitant to bring in a third party like a therapist or counselor, especially when it comes to family matters.
Yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah.
But sometimes having that neutral perspective can be so helpful.
Okay.
A therapist can provide a safe space to process your emotions, develop communication strategies, and even help mediate those difficult conversations.
It's like having a referee in a heated soccer match.
Exactly.
They can help keep things fair.
And ensure everyone's playing by the rules.
And it's not a sign of weakness or failure to seek outside support.
No, not at all.
It actually shows commitment and a willingness to invest in those healthy relationships.
Exactly. And setting boundaries is an ongoing process.
Yes, it's not a one-time fix.
It's about making small, consistent efforts to communicate your needs and adjust those boundaries as your relationships evolve.
So it's not about achieving perfection.
No.
It's about embracing that journey of growth and self-discovery for yourself and for your family.
You got it. And, speaking of growth, one of the most powerful aspects of setting boundaries is the ripple effect it can have on future generations.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more about that ripple effect.
Okay, so think about it. When you model healthy boundary-setting behavior for your children, nieces, nephews, younger siblings, you're not just creating a healthier dynamic for your own family, you're passing on those skills to the next generation.
So it's like planting a seed that will continue to grow long after you're gone.
Exactly. And those kids are learning that it's okay to express their needs, to set limits.
Right.
And to prioritize their own well-being.
And those valuable lessons.
Yes, that will benefit them in all their relationships.
Not just within the family.
Right. And that's what makes this whole journey so worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's not just about creating healthier boundaries for ourselves. It's about creating a more loving and supportive world for generations to come.
Okay, we've covered so much ground here, from challenging those unspoken family rules to navigating enmeshment, seeking outside support, and even that ripple effect of boundary setting on future generations.
It's been quite a journey, but before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Yeah, what's that?
The importance of self-care.
Yes. Self-care is so crucial, especially when you're dealing with those tricky family dynamics.
Absolutely. Setting boundaries is a form of self-care, but it's important to incorporate other self-care practices into your routine as well. Things like exercise, like spending time in nature journaling, or anything that helps you recharge and reconnect with yourself.
So it's about filling your own cup first.
Yes.
So you have the energy and resources to show up for others in a healthy way.
Precisely. And remember, self-care is not selfish. It's essential. It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
Before assisting others on an airplane. You can't help anyone if you're gasping for air yourself.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
I'm feeling so empowered and inspired to start putting these principles into practice.
That's great.
But before I go out and start setting boundaries like a boss, is there anything else we should cover? Any final words of wisdom to help us navigate this journey?
Well, I think it's important to remember that change takes time.
Yeah.
And it's rarely a linear process.
Uh-huh.
There will be setbacks, there will be moments of doubt, and there will be times when you feel like giving up.
Oh, yeah.
But the key is to keep coming back to those core principles of respect, communication, and self-care.
So it's about being patient with ourselves.
Yes.
Celebrating those small victories and trusting that you're moving in the right direction, even if the path isn't always smooth.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone on this journey.
Yeah.
There are tons of resources available to support you along the way, from books and podcasts to therapists and support groups.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out for help when you need it.
That's such a powerful reminder. Okay, I think we've officially covered it all. We've explored the ins and outs of setting healthy boundaries, tackled those tougher scenarios, and even talked about that ripple effect of positive change that extends far beyond our immediate families.
It's been a really insightful deep dive.
It has.
And I have a feeling you're going to walk away from this conversation feeling empowered to create some positive change in your own family.
I know I am. And I bet our listeners are feeling pretty empowered too. So as we wrap up this episode, I just want to encourage you to take those first steps, however small they may seem, start those conversations, set those boundaries, and trust that you have the strength and wisdom to create healthier and happier relationships with the people you love most. We've explored so many great strategies for setting healthy boundaries.
Yeah, it's been great.
But I think it's important to remember, this isn't a one-and-done thing.
No, it's not.
It's more like a dance
Yeah.
with some fancy footwork required along the way.
It's an ongoing process
Yeah.
that takes patience, flexibility, and a willingness to adapt as those family dynamics change.
So it's not about achieving perfection.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the journey of growth and self-discovery, both for ourselves and our families.
You got it. And you know what often comes up when we talk about setting boundaries with family?
What's that?
Guilt.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a real roadblock.
It can be a real stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yeah. How do we deal with those feelings of guilt?
Right. Guilt is like that uninvited guest who shows up to every family gathering and refuses to leave.
Exactly.
How do we deal with those feelings that can come up when we start to put our own needs first?
Well, the first step is acknowledging those feelings are totally normal.
Okay.
Guilt is often ingrained in family dynamics,
Yeah.
especially if you've been conditioned to put everyone else's needs before your own.
Right. Like at my family, it was like an unspoken rule that you never say no to a request,
Yeah.
even if it means you're running yourself totally ragged.
It's like you're expected to be the superhero
Right.
who swoops in and saves the day.
No matter the cost to your own well-being.
Right, no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from that superhero complex and start setting boundaries without feeling like we're letting everyone down?
Well, the guidelines suggest reframing your perspective on guilt.
Okay.
Ask yourself, is this guilt based on realistic expectations?
Yeah.
Or is it coming from those outdated family rules that no longer serve me?
So it's about challenging those old beliefs.
Yes.
And replacing them with new guidelines that prioritize our own well-being.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have the right to set boundaries,
Uh-huh.
even if it makes someone else unhappy.
Okay.
Their reaction is about them, not about you.
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in trying to please everyone
Right.
and end up neglecting our own needs.
And you know, one thing that can really help in those situations is to communicate your reasoning.
Okay.
So instead of just saying no, explain why you're setting that boundary.
So for example, if your mom asks you to bake 5 dozen cookies for her book club,
Yeah.
and you're already overwhelmed with work and other commitments,
Right.
instead of just saying, sorry, Mom, I can't,
Uh-huh.
you could say, Mom, I love you and I'd love to help, but I'm completely overwhelmed right now. Taking on anything else would just add to my stress, and I need to prioritize my well-being.
Exactly. It's about being honest and transparent
Yeah.
and trusting that they will understand.
Even if they don't agree.
Right. Even if they don't necessarily agree.
And even if they don't understand right away, that open communication will hopefully lead to a healthier dynamic.
Absolutely. And, you know, when it comes to those long-standing family patterns, change doesn't happen overnight.
Well, for sure.
There will be moments of frustration. There will
Yeah.
be pushback. And there will be times when you feel like you're taking one step forward and 2 steps back.
It's like those family gatherings where you try to set a boundary
Uh-huh.
and you're met with this chorus of groans and eye rolls.
Yeah.
Like you've just announced you're moving to a deserted island and changing your name.
It can feel like you're speaking a foreign language.
Right. So how do we stay the course when those old patterns keep coming up?
Well, the guidelines recommend focusing on your own growth
Okay.
rather than trying to control other people.
So we need to accept that we can't force our families to embrace these boundaries if they're not ready.
Right. You can't control their actions, but you can control your own responses.
It's like that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is model the behavior you want to see.
So by consistently setting and maintaining our boundaries, we might actually inspire those around us to do the same.
It's definitely possible.
Okay.
Remember, change is contagious, and sometimes those subtle shifts in our own behavior can create a ripple effect.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into healthy family boundaries, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of self-compassion.
I agree. This is not an easy journey.
No, it's not.
And it's so important to be kind to yourself along the way.
So celebrate those small victories.
Yes.
Give yourself some grace when you stumble. And never underestimate the power of those small but consistent steps in creating a more loving and fulfilling family dynamic.
You've got some incredible tools
We do.
to create those healthy boundaries, and I have a feeling you're going to put them to good use.
I think so too.
Remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We're all in this together, figuring it out, one boundary at a time.
What a journey this has been, from understanding what healthy boundaries are to navigating those tricky family dynamics. We've covered so much ground. And the best part is this is just the beginning. You've got the knowledge, you've got the inspiration, and now it's time to put those insights into action. So go out there, set those boundaries with love and compassion, and watch as your family relationships blossom in ways you never thought possible.